Leggari Nation, we have an epic video to show you today. A custom-made Leggari Shuffleboard. We will show you the whole process of coating it, applying the scoring stencils, and the top coat. During the coating process, we have a special guest, the builder of this custom shuffleboard. Hear about how we met him and how this project came to be. It was an amazing project to do, and we're excited to show you the entire process here. Stay tuned to the end to see some epic shots of this shuffleboard in action.
I'm gonna go over what we did to get to this point in this process. This is a 16-foot long shuffleboard top. We have the table over there. I'll show you guys that here in a minute. We built the top, MDF, and bondoed it, routed all the edges, so all the edges are rounded smooth. Obviously the bondo is the gray colored spots, so every nail hole, every seam, which seam on the top, all the faces. We usually do the seams on the top. This one we did them on the edges because you're never gonna see it when it's in the shuffleboard table. And so sanded those. Obviously you never wanna coat over a square edge, so we did a small router on those. That way we had a little bit of a curve to that edge. And then obviously we wanna make it level, right? We don't wanna coat something that's unlevel, even if we're doing our stone kit process, which incorporates the dirty pour technique. We wanna make sure these are as level as we can get them. So we've already done that, and now we're ready for primer. So after sanding, leveling it, you wanna make sure you wipe it clean because we're gonna be taping onto the faces, and if it's not clean, it could be a bond breaker. When we go to pull the tape, it could pull off the primer because it didn't bond to the wood. So make sure your edges are perfectly clean. I like to clean them maybe twice using a rag, denatured alcohol. But yeah, that's it. So that's where we're at now. So now we're gonna coat it. We're gonna be doing coffee and gold Leggari effects stone kit process where we tape off the edge, we pour it twice as thick. We don't really touch it. We just let it kind of do its own thing after we dump it out. Pull the tape after it sets up a little, and that'll coat the edges nice and thick. So we got the primer here. Since we're doing coffee, we're gonna be doing a brown primer. Mixing primer is simple. I'm gonna dump the 2 jugs into a 32-ounce container, and then I'm gonna add 2 ounces of water, stir with a stir stick, and then just dump a bead down the middle and cross roll that out, hit my edges, throw a fan on it, that way we can speed dry it, and we'll be able to put tape on this within about a half an hour, 45 minutes. Now, if you're doing a white primer or something and a white epoxy, I'd probably hit my edges twice. I want those as white or whatever color of primer, solid as I can get them. Obviously the brown's gonna cover the MDF wood really well, so I'm not as worried about that. But if it was white, I'd probably double prime just the faces. That way if there's any thin spots on the edge, you can't see through to the brown wood. Okay, so the primer's down. You guys saw us put a fan on it. Wait about a half an hour. Again, if you put airflow over that primer, and if it's going over wood, wood's gonna soak it up. Airflow from the fan's gonna speed dry that primer. So it's still tacky, but that's when we wanna coat over this. So now we wanna tape our edges, create a dam to eliminate the resin from flowing off until it sets up to where it doesn't move as much, and then we'll pull that tape. Just yellow painter's tape, and I'll usually tape halfway on the face and leave the other half hanging up. Easiest way to tape is dominant hand, pull it out, and then I can kind of adjust where I want it. Once I get it where I want it, I just tack it there, run my finger on it. So there's one row. Now we're gonna do it another layer. Try to keep it at the same height. Doesn't have to be perfect, but all right, now we want to really press in the tape, especially on our corners, and then I'll always pinch those in. That'll just create a little more tension on the tape. So now I'm going to go around and really press this on the edge. Make sure we got a nice tight seal. And then I'll just kind of round this top edge a little. Just get as much of this tape kind of sealed off as you can. Now, if you want to, you can map out a design, right, with a pencil, Sharpie, even a paint stick will kind of etch the primer. So you have kind of a design to follow. So what I'll do is I'll grab one of those. We'll kind of map out our pours. That way, once we're pouring, we're kind of just following a pattern. It makes it really fast, and there's really no guesswork once you're actually pouring. All right, so I mapped out the majority of our pour patterns. I don't have to do every single one because once we get these out, we'll know where to go and kind of follow. And so we're gonna go mix the resin up, and then we'll jump back over here and start pouring it out. So I'm gonna go over the mixing process. It's really simple, and we're gonna show you the most efficient way to mix without ever having issues with your resin not setting up or having soft spots in your project. So what we have is a product here. I got 2 buckets. So we have our first mixing bucket, and then we have our secondary mixing bucket. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna dump all the product in the first one, mix it up, scrape the sides, and then I'm gonna dump it into this one. And what we do is we call it 3P2, where we go up and down 3 times in the first one, and then the P stands for pour. So we're gonna pour into the secondary one, and then we're gonna go up and down with the paddle 2 more times, and that's gonna mix the resin perfectly. Because what happens is we put our part A in, it gets around all the edges. We put our part B in, and unless you scrape your edges and the bottom really good, you're probably gonna have unmixed part A in your container. And then when you go to dump it out, some of that unmixed part A or B can come out of the bucket onto your project, and then you'll have soft spots, sticky spots. So to eliminate that, this is the best way to do it. So again, it's called 3P2, and I'll kind of go over that as we're doing it. So we're gonna get all the part A's dumped in, and we're using a 1.5 gallon kit from the store and a 3-quart kit of our metallic epoxy. So we'll get this dumping, and then we got our 3-quart kit here. And we're gonna just let these dump out until they start to slowly drip. We always want to tip our jugs back, let the product come out of the handle. And then since the resin's cold, it's not moving as quickly, so I'm gonna just run a torch on the outside of this jug, and that'll speed up the process of it coming out. You see how slow this drains out here. And then if I heat it up, all right, so we got our part A in. Now we're gonna add the part B's. And these are a lot more fluid, so they'll come out a lot faster. We want to do the same thing, tilt these back, let the product come out of the handles, and then let them finish draining. Okay, so we're ready to mix. So now this is where the 3P2 comes into play. I'm gonna go from the top, full speed to the bottom, go around on the bottom when I hit the bottom, and then come back up slow, go around the top. That basically stands for 1. We're gonna do that 3 times. All right, so here we go. So that's basically 1. We're gonna do that 2 more times, pour into the secondary bucket, and then do that the remaining 2 times. All right, so we went up and down 3 times. Now we're gonna pour. into the secondary container. And then I'm gonna scrape as much out as I can get out. Scrape the bottom. And so this bucket's basically done for. Now, I'm gonna go up and down 2 more times, and then I know for a fact that this is thoroughly mixed. I'm not gonna have any issues with the resin setting up. I don't have to worry about how long I mixed it. So for this look that we're going for, we're gonna be doing just coffee metallics and our Leggari effects in gold. And so I have the small metallics for the 3-quart, the medium for the 1.5 gallons. We're gonna dump both of those in here, get that mixed in, and then we'll start batching out our dirty pour batches. All right, metallics are in. Now, if you mix this with the paddle wheel submerged all the way in there, it's not gonna make a bunch of metallic powder float in the air. Or if you don't care, take it outside, mix it. We've even put a vacuum on here to eliminate that, but I'll be able to minimize it by sticking this paddle all the way in and just slowly letting that get inside the resin. Now you guys can also, if you're not mixing like different colors, you can add the metallics in once you have your part A's in the bucket, get that mixed in so you're not wasting time with the hardener in there mixing the metallics in, but just an option. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna start batching out our stone kit pours. And then we're gonna be adding the Leggari Effects Gold into these pours, and then as I'm pouring them out, I'll probably be squirting some into the containers as we're pouring it out on the table as well. So always shake up your effects, and then I'm gonna squirt some in the bottom and probably 3 of these. So you can see how it kind of wants to float to the surface. So I'm going to try to push some of that down in there as I'm pouring. Okay guys, I want to introduce Lee. He's the creator of the shuffleboard table. How you doing?
Good.
You ready for this?
Oh yeah.
So, nice. So we'll head over here. I'll show you guys the shuffleboard table. Very cool. He builds these from scratch. And he called us, had a cool idea. Hey, let's coat the top with epoxy. So it's obviously a little dusty here, but these are the tables. Why don't you just kind of tell them how you built this thing?
Well, yeah, first we met at Home Depot about 6 months ago, and I
That's
didn't
right,
realize
yeah.
you were a local vendor, that you were here in the Tri-Cities, so that was great.
Yeah.
And I've been doing these for a couple years, but I've always been doing polyurethane tops, and I wanted something that would be different, not take so many coats, and maybe be more artistic, because I love what I've seen here in the walls and the sample boards. So looking at if this will work for shuffleboards, basically this is lumber that I get from Home Depot or that kind of place. Put it together, use the bolts. I've modified my design over the years and come up with this. It seems to be the simplest, take the least amount of wood, but structurally it's been working out great.
Yeah, the thing's stout, man. I mean, It's heavy, it's stout. I like how you did the black bolts. You guys see these black bolts here? Super cool idea. When I saw that, that kind of stood out to me. The black bolts kind of ties it all in. So yeah, 16 foot, right?
Yes.
16 footer. And then I think that, what is that, 15 feet, the actual shuffleboard?
Yeah, so you get about 4 inches here for the gutter, and this
Nice.
about 15.
I'm gonna show Lee kind of how I do it. I'm gonna have him grab a couple containers, dump some out so he can get his hands in on this project as well. Okay, so like I said, guys, we're gonna follow the pattern. And when I'm doing these pours, I wanna take note of the colors that are coming out. You don't wanna just pour from one side or the other, and then you get down maybe halfway and you don't really have any gold or whatever color you're doing, you have it all on one side. So if I'm getting a lot of gold out here, I'll maybe jump around, get a lot more gold in other spots. So I like to do them kind of thin as I can get them. Right, kind of a evenish pour. So not getting a lot of gold out, guys. So now what I want to do is I'm going to squirt some effects into this top. And now I'm going to get quite a bit of gold coming out right off the bat. You'll see what I mean here. Just like that. And that's kind of the look we're going for throughout this table. That's okay to have some subtle browns, but I'm just going to keep adding in the top here and just kind of jumping down the table. So see kind of the widths I'm pouring, right? If you pour a big pile out, it kind of defeats all the patterns we got. So you're almost better just kind of going slow, right? Obviously the less you have in it, the easier it's going to be to pour out smaller beads, but.
And it'll all blend in together nice and
yeah.
smooth.
Yeah, we're not even going to touch this. So what we want to do is get the majority poured out, because this is going to spread out a lot still. Okay. So we don't want to pour right next to them necessarily yet. Get the majority of these open spots, and then we come back and fine tune next to them all. But yeah, I would start putting some gold in there. Squirting a little in, dumping it out. All right, so now that we're getting closer to obviously filling the table, we want to be a little bit more precise on where we're dumping these out. I mean, a lot of these would actually fill in because it's so thick, but now we're just going to we'll go around and we'll fill in spots, maybe add some gold. Like if we have a spot maybe that's really brown with no gold, we'll pour some out there. All right, so the next thing is spritzing some isopropyl on it. So yeah, so then we let this evaporate for like 5-10 minutes, mist it with denatured alcohol, and then we just wait for the right time to pull the tape. And I'll always check it. I'll fold the tape back. You can see how fluid it is. Yeah. If we pulled the tape right now, all this would kind of flow off the edge. You'd have all these drag marks. It'd mess up the design. So by damming it up, we let the resin set up, it'll start to get sticky. And then when we pull the tape, this design won't move at all. So the top will look exactly like this. Really, really cool process that we came up with. Okay, so this is basically the time to pull the tape. We had a few spots like right here. You can kind of see it, the tape kind of pulled off. So that'll happen if you have like thick spots. So when you guys are pouring out, try to make sure you're not pouring out a ton of resin in just like one spot, right? We want to kind of move it all throughout the table. That way it has kind of an even thickness throughout, and then we don't have like really thick spots. So we had a few little blowouts. What we did is we actually took paint sticks on some of these spots and just taped them to the edge to add a little more rigidity to hold those thick spots back. So that's how you can do that on those. And when I'm checking for the right time to pull, I'll just fold this tape back and I'll kind of watch it flow over. I want it to be moving kind of slow. So that's when I know the right time to pull. And it could be different from temperatures, how long you took to mix. So you always want to kind of check your edges. So we're just going to start pulling, wadding this tape up. And so I'll show you when I'm checking, I'll fold it over. See how it's really thick right there, but it's kind of just slowly moving over. You can kind of see here it's slowly moving down where I pulled. That's kind of the right time to pull it. And we have some pretty thick edges, so obviously the thicker your edges, the sooner you're gonna wanna pull that tape so you have enough product to flow over. All right, now it's starting to flow over the edge, so what we want to do is kind of let it flow for a minute. The spots that were thick on top, obviously they're going to coat it really, really fast. Like right over here, we have, this is a thinner spot, okay, so it's not moving as much, that's okay. But what we want to do is just slick off this face, get rid of all the surface tension. So basically get all the primer covered in epoxy, and then they'll let it flow over a lot easier. But don't worry about messing up the design because it's still going to flow over. So if it's halfway down, I'm just blending in the spots that you can see the primer. I don't necessarily need to blend the whole face. So we want to be watching our faces. Like I can see some drips right here. All I need to do is just brush these in, right, and then they'll start to flow even. So I'll kind of go around the table, check for those. This is what we're looking for, nice and even, flat faces. Obviously we got some more drips here. Just kind of spread those out, flatten them off, and that'll start to flow evenly. So last thing we're gonna do is just scrape the drips. It's obviously a little early for that, so we'll have to do it a couple times. Simple tongue depressor when it's kind of wet like this. And then when it starts to set up and get sticky, I like to use a putty knife. It'll kind of just shave it off. All right guys, now we are ready to apply the stencil to get our numbers. And we actually had a custom stencil made, put our logo in it, so it's gonna be really cool. But since this sat over 24 hours before we put the stencil on, we sanded it. That way we know our top coat's gonna bond to it. So as long as you're top coating the next day, you don't have to necessarily sand it. Plus, if you have any imperfections in the surface or anything, or the edges, you can sand those down. I sanded this with 220 grit palm sander hooked up to a vacuum. And so this has been cleaned, rag, denatured alcohol. And like I said, 220 grit. Be real careful if you do your faces, corners by hand. A lot of times you want to do your faces by hand, but as long as you use a really fine grit, 220 grit or finer, it takes a lot longer to kind of sand through the epoxy. So this is ready for our stencil. And again, you want to make sure it's nice and clean, denatured alcohol, rag, sprayed a couple times, get all that dust off. So when you run your hand across it, right, you're not getting any white residue of epoxy dust up. So another thing is, you don't necessarily have to have a stencil made. You can just get like some number stencils, 1, 2, and 3, and then you can simply tape off your lines with just tape, right? So I could get some number stencils, and then I could just tape off my lines, right? Put my numbers here, tape around those so when I spray it doesn't get anywhere else. So you don't necessarily have to make a stencil, but if you want to do something custom, maybe your logo, maybe your last name, you could have a stencil made. Any sign shop can do that. They just make them out of vinyl, and I'll kind of show you what the stencil looks like. So this is it right here. So this is basically going to sit right here. We got our Leggari logo, Leggari products. Here's our lines, and then we got our numbers 1, 2, and 3, and then we got our other lines here. So everything that's cut out is where the spray paint's going to go, and then everything that's white, solid white, is not going to have any spray paint. And what we did to make this easy, we found center of the stencil, center on both ends, and then we're gonna find center on the board as well, and then we'll line that up, tape it, and we'll show you guys how to apply it. And we're not worried about getting like bubbles, right? We don't want creases, but if you get a couple air bubbles, that's fine, because all we're concerned about is these spots that are cut out. So now we have half of it down. Pull the backing just like we did. And we're just gonna do the same exact thing. Notice how there's slack in it. He's not holding it tight. Just letting it drape. And I'm not worried about pressing all this stuff down, right? Just everywhere it's gonna be cut out. We want a good tight seal so we don't get any bleed marks when we spray. And we're gonna fold these down the edge. And then since we're spraying, we wanna tape off our edges. Also this spot that we cut, just in case it gets overspray. Cover that top. So again, guys, the main spots are where it's cut out. I'm not worried about if the tape's high or anywhere here. Just everywhere it's cut out, I wanna make sure it's about the same spot. Now we know we're not gonna get any overspray on the edge. Everything's covered on the top, even up here. And when we spray this, we'll kind of spray this way, not out over towards the rest of the uncovered epoxy. And then last thing, just make sure this is stuck down really good. All the edges. We're gonna be using Rust-Oleum spray paint in white. We were debating between gold metallic and white since it's a game. We decided to do it white so they're really visible. And you guys can do any colors you want, obviously. Red, brown, green, doesn't matter. And then to minimize bleed marks, I'm gonna be doing multiple coats, thinner coats, because if I spray thick, heavy coat, one coat, it's gonna sit there, it's more prone to bleeding because it's taking longer to dry. If I do multiple thin coats, we're gonna have some nice crisp edges as long as we press all of our edges and our stencil down really well. Let the fans blow on this for about a half hour, and it is still, like if I touch right outside the letters, it is still sticky. It's not peeling any up, but I don't want to touch it. So I want to be able to pull this off nice and easy and just let this sit overnight so it can completely dry and it's not tacky. So we're going to be real careful when I peel it. I'll get all the outside tape off first. So if you guys do get overspray, you can sand it off or just take denatured alcohol in a rag and usually can wipe it off. Sanding it's going to be faster. And then the next thing, we wanted to do spray paint because it's not as thick as vinyl would be if we did this in vinyl. If you do it in vinyl, you're going to have to flood coat it, right? So you can cover that vinyl and make it smooth. We should be able to just do our urethane top coat over this since it's spray painted and it's really thin, and it shouldn't affect the pucks as they're sliding. So we're getting ready to put the shuffleboard in the actual table. But again, we did our gloss urethane with our grit additive. And obviously all shuffleboards have that gloss, high gloss, smooth finish. So I wanted to just test it, make sure it was gonna function like it should with that grit additive. And the reason we did that is because you're putting shuffleboard sand on there anyways. And so I'll just do a couple test runs. It works awesome, just like it should. So we're good to go. So we'll clean this off. And when we set this on there, since it's so long, we don't want it to flex. So we're gonna tilt it on its side, get a couple guys over here. We're gonna carry it over there, set it down, and then we're gonna screw in from the bottom of the shuffleboard table into the shuffleboard, and that's gonna lock it in. So we got the board completely level, long ways, sideways. So once we set this in there, screw it down, it should be perfectly level.